Thank you and good morning. I'm Godfrey Bahiigwa. I work with the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries in Uganda. This could have been one presentation with Martin. Maybe we should have sat down and had one. I guess the value addition that I'll bring this morning is the country perspective or experiences that we have had so far. And so I had several slides, but my initial slides are actually the same as Martin, so I'm going to have to skip many of them. I guess the one I will start with is to clearly understand the question that was put to us: how comprehensive is the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program? And I think the word comprehensive in this case means several things. It means that it should be complete, should be inclusive, wide-ranging, far-ranging, and so on. In terms of design, in terms of conceptualization, I guess also in terms of implementation. And so the question to inquire is, does the CAADP fit, or does it have these characteristics of what a comprehensive program should be? And who judges that CAADP is comprehensive? The initiators, the implementers? Who is the judge as to whether this is a comprehensive program? Now, I could take an academic perspective, but I have chosen to take the practitioner's perspective, because on a daily basis, I'm worried about implementing our agriculture agenda, which is CAADP focused. So I'll skip these slides, which are about the genesis of CAADP. The last 2.5 days we've had that. Martin just took you through the CAADP pillars, the principles that underlie CAADP, and how countries have used these principles to guide them in the design of their investment programs, but also following them during the process of implementation. So those are known. Also, if you look back at the last 2.5 days, we have gone through the agriculture development challenges in the continent. Now, if you take the value chain approach, there are those that are quite specific at the production node, constraints at the value addition or the middle node, and also the same challenges on the marketing side. Those are known. And we have known them before CAADP, and we know them even when we are in the process of CAADP. So I will not labor on those. I guess now the question is, if you look at the development challenges, and you look at the CAADP pillars, the 4 CAADP pillars, do we feel comfortable that the 4 CAADP pillars do address this broad array of challenges? And I think, while we understand that there are specific aspects to each country, but I think overall we could actually make a judgment and say, or I could make a judgment and say, I think generally there is a match between the broad constraints of African agricultural development and the 4 CAADP pillars. So the answer would generally be yes. So if it is a yes, my question is, if it's actually comprehensive, at least in terms of conceptualization, linking to the challenges we have, how come that even in this conference, we are still discussing the same issues that we discussed before we formulated CAADP, and 8 years after CAADP was ratified by our heads of state in 2003? I think to me that is the fundamental question. Why are we still talking about the same things 8 years later? Now, again, that is another broad question, and it could take us days to discuss. But I guess I will simplify it and talk about 2 things. What we, at the country level, and in this case specifically Uganda, we have seen as benefits of this CAADP process, and also what we see as the challenges during implementation. I think that's where I will concentrate in my next 3 slides. What are the benefits we have seen so far at country level since we started engaging with this CAADP process? The first one is the strong analysis that was done before we went into designing our national plan. Very strong analysis supported by serious research, and IFPRI in this case did support Uganda. And that set the basis for helping us think about what the areas of growth are likely to be, where we're likely to see higher growth coming to be able to impact on economic growth within the sector, overall growth, poverty reduction, and so on. The second benefit we have seen is that this process has helped us to generate consensus around our national agriculture investment plan. We have a 5-year investment plan, and the engagement following the CADA principles helped us put together a strong investment plan with consensus from all stakeholders. The third benefit we have seen is rallying around agriculture. At the international level, I think major development partners, when they think about engaging with Africa on agriculture, it's about the CADA process. So I think that's a great benefit. At the continent level, of course, you have the African Union and NEPAD, the initiators of this of CADA. You have the regional economic communities in the different parts of the continent around the CADA agenda. And certainly at the national level, we translate the CADA framework into national investment plan. So to have everybody on the continent largely rally around the CADA agenda, I think is a great benefit. You have heard a million times the famous 2 targets within the CADA framework, the requirement for governments to spend 10% of their budget on agriculture in order to stimulate 6% growth. Now, academicians have had all sorts of research done to determine whether what went through the determination of the 10% and 6%. But that question aside, what we have seen is we have begun to measure ourselves against those targets. Whether you question them or not is a different matter, but everybody is measuring themselves against that, and I think that's a great benefit because it creates peer pressure to see how one country is committed to achieving those targets against others. I think that's also a very good thing. The fifth benefit we have seen is mobilization of resources to be able to implement national plans. So within national governments, you see increased pressure on ministries of finance to spend more money in agriculture. They may not reach the 10% in 1 to 3 years, but there is always constant pressure from different circles saying, look, you committed to spending 10%, where are you? Okay? And I think if that wasn't the case, there may be laxity by governments to be able to do that. But also we see development partners. You remember the L'Aquila G8 conference and subsequent similar meetings. Some of you may be aware of the Global Agriculture Food Security Program, and several countries on the continent have already benefited from this GAFSP initiative. Uganda hasn't, unfortunately, but I'm happy that other African countries have. But also, following the CADA process, there is usually, after the signing of the compact, there is a business meeting, and some countries have had additional commitment to funding. So that's another benefit. Then finally, another benefit at country level is the emergence of networks of non-state actors. Okay? Because in the formulation, governments lead quite a lot. And also in the implementation, governments lead quite a lot. But we have observed that to really make a difference, it has to go beyond government, private sector, civil society. And we have recently had a very good partnership with a USAID-funded program called Africa Lead. And they have trained over 1,000 people on this continent based on the national plans and also understanding CADA in general. So in Uganda, we observe the emergence of these networks of non-state actors, which is very important to keep pressure and also bring about elements of advocacy and possibly push for more accountability towards, by government towards the resources spent to the agriculture sector. So those are the benefits that I could quickly put together. But there are also challenges for us who wake up every day worrying about how to translate these investment plans into results that make a difference into people's lives. That despite the Maputo Declaration about more funding to agriculture, we still see that many governments haven't reached the 10%. And certainly my own government, the figure hovers around 5%. And there's always pushing for more resources. But it's not, we also need to say it's not just about more resources in terms of volume. There's always a question also about efficiency. And that's an internal question. That before you ask for more resources, are you using the little that you have efficiently? And that's always an internal question. The second question that arises, or the second challenge, is lack of a common definition of agriculture spending. And in government, and certainly in Uganda, this is an ongoing debate between the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Agriculture. Because the Ministry of Finance will argue, and possibly collectively, that if you spend money on rural roads, that is spending money on agriculture, because those roads are linking input and output markets. You could have highly productive areas, but if there are no road networks to evacuate the commodities, then you cannot get the benefits. If you spend money on rural electrification so that you can have more value addition industries come up, that is spending on agriculture. So there is that, fluid definition of agriculture. And yet ministries of agriculture worry about extension, research, policy, regulation, and they want to see more money come to those areas. And so, and I think that's one of the points Martin made this morning, that I think some of the success is actually beyond traditional agriculture. That sometimes the stimulus beyond the stimulus to agriculture may actually lie outside of the mandate of the Ministry of Agriculture. And those of you who listened to Eleni on the first day, this is what she was talking about, what she defined as agriculture plus. In other words, it's just beyond the Ministry of Agriculture. It has to be, looking at those things that impact on agriculture, but are outside the mandate of agriculture. And I think, as Martin said, the challenge is how you coordinate those actions to make sure that you get the benefits maximum. The third challenge that we observe is that actually many ministries of agriculture, and certainly the one in Uganda, we realize is not exactly configured to be able to pull off successfully the implementation of these CADAP-based plans. And I think part of it, that lack of proper configuration emerges out of the reforms that happened in the 1990s, the structural adjustment programs that called for a mean and lean civil service. But later on it would be discovered that actually that was probably not a right thing to do, because ministries were left bare with limited capacity, both technical, implementation, and so on. And finally, the other challenge that we observed, and especially for countries that have decentralized systems of government, or maybe federal systems of government, while you may have a good national investment plan that is agreed, that is cohesive, translating that national plan into decentralized or federal level government is not an automatic thing. It's actually a big challenge. In our case, we call them districts. So from the national, we have several districts, and they have their own district development plans. How to integrate this national plan into those local government plans is not automatic. And secondly, you also have issues of funding where largely local governments are funded by central government through grants, conditional grants. Now, that doesn't give much room for the local governments themselves to be able to have flexibility around addressing locally specific needs. So these are some of the challenges. that I could also quickly highlight in the interest of time. And finally, Mr. Chairman, my last slide. I started with the benefits. I've talked about some of the challenges, but also we see positive energy. And I think that's what I want to end up with, that there is positive energy that we observe at country level. And certainly the current conditions, especially in the East African region, and possibly much of Africa, despite the commitment through the CADA process, going through it and formulating the investment plans, we are seeing actually more real attention to agriculture. As you know, many countries in the East Africa region are experiencing unprecedented high levels of inflation. And much of this inflation is food-driven. And so governments are asking themselves, what do? We need to focus. We need to do more in the agriculture sector, because that's what is going to drive it down. And certainly for Uganda, which is, provides a substantial share of food that is consumed in the region, our policy stance has been not to curtail exports, but as a result, we have seen spiraling inflation, and the challenge is for us then to boost production so that we can take advantage of that. The second thing that we see, the engagement with the private sector, this time in a more real sense. We are observing that while the public sector can play its role in delivering research goods, in delivering extension products, in putting in place policies, we have to partner, by all means, with the private sector. Whether it is producing seed, animal breeding, and so on, we believe that it is engaging with the private sector through public-private partnerships that we can actually make very good progress. And finally, I have already talked about the creation of these CADAP national agriculture investment plans, the champions who are beyond government. And through that program, I talked about Africa Lead, funded by USAID. We in Uganda have had 120 people from all walks of life get trained. And these now can speak to and advocate for the implementation of our plan. It's something that we haven't done before, and we believe that this will help in terms of advocacy and also pushing for implementation at the different levels of the actors. So, Mr. Chairman, I will leave it at that, and thank you.